What do 42 steel beams used in industrial construction and 25 million doses of methamphetamine have in common? It should be nothing, but in late 2024, they were the foundation of a half-ton secret. This documentary aims to present an honest and unfiltered account of the case surrounding the currently charged Auckland construction figure, John Anthony Giles. John Anthony Giles is a 52-year-old professional quantity surveyor who has long been a fixture in the Auckland building sector. To understand the magnitude of his alleged involvement, one must understand the role itself. A quantity surveyor is a specialist in construction costs and logistics, a professional whose expertise is required to manage the massive financial and material requirements of commercial projects. For years, Giles was associated with Wade Commercial Construction, a prominent Auckland firm, before transitioning to establish his own independent consultancy in the year of 2024. It was during this period of professional autonomy that Giles allegedly utilized his industry expertise to act as the importer for a shipment that would trigger one of the largest drug investigations in New Zealand history. The chronological timeline of the case begins in the month of September 2024. A standard shipping container, originating from the United States, arrived at the Port of Auckland. Inside the container were 42 massive industrial steel beams, heavy-duty components seemingly destined for New Zealand's bustling construction market. On the surface, it was nothing out of the ordinary. The shipment was legally imported by a company of which John Anthony Giles was the sole director and shareholder for. However, the shipment had already been identified by customs analysts as a potential risk. Utilizing intelligence gathering protocols and targeting algorithms, Customs flagged the consignment for an X-ray inspection after detecting subtle inconsistencies in the structural makeup of several beams. When the X-ray images were finally processed, they revealed that the hollow cores of the steel beams, which should have been empty, were packed with a dense, crystalline material. Customs officers physically breached the beams and discovered a whopping 515 kilograms of methamphetamine tucked inside the industrial steel. At current market rates, the wholesale value of the half-ton shipment sits between 51 and 77 million New Zealand dollars. However, once broken down for the street, the potential retail value climbs to an astronomical figure, exceeding $500 million. This staggering profit margin is exactly why global cartels are willing to risk everything for a New Zealand foothold. As the third largest border seizure in our history, the sheer volume signaled a massive, deliberate attempt to saturate the local market. But despite the gravity of the find, authorities didn't move in for an arrest immediately. They chose to wait. The discovery triggered a high-stakes, multi-agency operation dubbed Operation Girder between customs agents and the Police National Organised Crime Group. The authorities initiated what is known as a CD, short for a controlled delivery, a tactic in which the shipment is allowed to proceed as normal to its final destination, under heavy, covert surveillance. The objective was to identify the network responsible for the physical retrieval of the drugs. For days, undercover units tracked the 42 steel beams as they were transported away from the Auckland docks and deep into the rural Waikato. On October 4th, 2024, the investigation reached its climax. As the shipment arrived at a secluded rural address, tactical units swooped in. At the property, police discovered two men who had recently flown into New Zealand from Australia specifically for the task. They were caught in the act of deconstructing the steel beams, using industrial equipment to cut through the metal to reach the half-ton of narcotics inside. The lengths to which the crew were willing to go to protect their investment were also soon revealed. During the search, officers recovered a military-style semi-automatic rifle and a significant cache of ammunition. In total, 7 people were arrested during the initial phase of the operation, representing a transnational network stretching far and wide across the globe. As the physical retrieval team was being processed in the Waikato, detectives were simultaneously executing search warrants in the Auckland corporate world. The focus of the investigation narrowed quickly onto the person who had officially arranged the importation, leading back to none other than Mr. John Anthony Giles. And in mid-October 2024, police raided the office Giles occupied at the premises of Wade Commercial Construction. He was arrested and charged with the importation of Class A narcotics and possession for supply, charges that, given the scale of the shipment, carry a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. When questioned by a senior customs investigator, Giles admitted to being the importer, but adamantly denied any knowledge of the methamphetamine hidden inside the beams. His explanation was grounded in his professional role. He claimed that as a quantity surveyor, he was merely managing a procurement request for a commercial client involved in the oil and petroleum industry. Giles claimed that his involvement was strictly logistical and that he had been used by his client as an unwitting conduit for the illicit cargo. It was a professional defense that initially kept his identity hidden behind name suppression. As the investigation expanded into the corporate sector, the legal proceedings moved swiftly into the courtroom following the mid-October arrests, and by the 21st of the same month, Giles appeared in the Auckland District Court, alongside the oil and petroleum co-defendant for a high-stakes bail hearing. The gap between his arrest and this appearance was a period of intense legal maneuvering, as his team worked to secure his release while the police continued to build their case. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution began to outline a much more calculated role for the Surveyor, with their case centering on the concept of logistical accountability. They argue that a specialist of Giles's experience, acting as the sole director of the importing company, wasn't a victim, but a critical component used to bypass border security under the guise of a legitimate business. They contend that his professional credentials provided the perfect cover for a shipment of such magnitude. Despite the unprecedented scale of the half-tonne bust, Judge Stephen Bonner granted Giles bail. The conditions were among the strictest ever seen for a narcotics case, being required to surrender his passport, and was placed under a total ban on using cell phones for anything other than his legal defense. For months, the two men remained nameless figures in the headlines. Giles's lawyer, Matthew Goodwin, argued that publication would cause extreme hardship and ruin the Surveyor's professional reputation before he ever even got to reach a trial. However, name suppression in New Zealand is a privilege that carries a high threshold, and as the case progressed, the legal grounds for secrecy began to thin. The standoff reached its limits on March 22, 2025. In a shift of legal strategy, Giles abandoned his bid for suppression. His lawyer said the Surveyor was now confident that publication would not destroy his consultancy, effectively choosing to meet the allegations in the public eye rather than behind a wall of silence. Mr. Giles maintains that he is innocent of the charges he faces and will vigorously defend those at trial, Goodwin stated. The suppression created a sharp divide in the case. While the name John Anthony Giles became the public face of the operation, his co-defendant from the oil sector has remained under secrecy. To this day, the other man's identity remains protected by ongoing non-publication orders, though both men currently remain on bail. For Mr. Giles, he awaits a trial that is expected to delve into the intricate, digital and financial records of his importation business. In the wake of the arrests, the collateral damage of the discovery began to surface. One of the most prominent victims of association was Charlie Wade, the managing director of Wade Commercial Construction. As police had executed the raid at Giles's office, which sat within the company's building, the firm was forced to contend with damaging speculation. Compelled by the situation, Charlie Wade stepped into the spotlight to distance his brand from the scandal. His public statement was blunt and unequivocal. "We are appalled by these charges." To be absolutely clear, Wade Commercial Construction had no involvement whatsoever in the alleged offending. He went on to further state, "There is no record, no evidence, and no suggestion that Wade's name, reputation, or resources were used in connection with these alleged crimes, either directly or indirectly." He also noted that Giles had effectively finished his tenure to launch his own consultancy before the shipment arrived. The situation serves as a stark reminder that, for legitimate businesses in New Zealand, a single association can become a real and present danger to a hard-earned reputation. Beyond the professional fallout, the primary victims remain the communities that were spared of the estimated 25.7 million doses of methamphetamine. The prevention of this scale of harm is a massive victory for public safety, yet the presence of the half-tonne load in general is deeply concerning. Operation Girder is a definitive marker of the radical shift in New Zealand's criminal landscape, dwarfed only by the 713-kilogram seizure from 2023 and the 613-kilogram airport interception of 2022. Operation Girder ranks as the third largest border interception in the country's history. The records are no longer being broken by a few grams, but by hundreds of kilograms at a time. In 2023, the Honey House beer case served as a horrific warning of what happens when these shipments slip through the net. In that instance, a warehouse in the Auckland suburb of Manukau was discovered to be housing nearly 750 kilograms of the substance, a cache that successfully made it past the border. The true scale of that operation was only uncovered when 21-year-old Aiden Sagala tragically passed away after unwittingly consuming liquid methamphetamine from a can he believed to be beer. His death triggered a massive police response, resulting in the arrest of his boss, Himajit Singh Karlan, and the mastermind Baltej Singh, both now serving over 20 years in prison. Police also restrained $36 million in real estate property in connection to the young man's tragic passing. As cases like this emerge time and time again, they raise urgent questions about the vetting of commercial importers. In the ongoing legal saga of John Anthony Giles, the intersection of high-level professional services and global narcotics trafficking is laid bare. Whether he was a calculating architect of this importation or a professional who was unknowingly manipulated by a sophisticated syndicate is a question that at this point in time, only the High Court can answer. What are your thoughts on the emergence of professional enablers in large-scale drug cases? Should there be a higher level of scrutiny for specialists who manage international logistics in the construction sector? And as a community, what can we do to make sure our ports, our warehouses, and our construction sites remain symbols of New Zealand's growth rather than vessels for its destruction? Share your perspectives in the comments below. If you found this documentary informative, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more in-depth explorations of often overlooked, lesser-known stories. Who else would you like to see us detail next? Your engagement helps us continue to shed light on otherwise unheard narratives.